Hey, what's up? I am back in Istanbul after an amazing 5 days in Mardin in Turkey. I shared some of the photos that I took while I was there, and I've got some more video content which I plan to put together over the next couple of days and share with everybody. So keep a lookout for that. I also wanted to say thank you once again. I know I've been saying thank you quite a bit since I started talking to you about the feedback that I got yesterday. I was a little bit anxious going into my first formal vlog yesterday. Anxious about putting myself out there, anxious about talking to the camera, anxious about covering all the things that I wanted to cover, and having prepared so much in my head. When I eventually got down to recording, there were a couple of things that I forgot, and I'll tackle those in later videos, because two of them, the idea of vulnerability and radical honesty, are two things which I find very important, and I wanted to mention them yesterday, but I'm not going to mention them today because they're going to take up quite a bit of time, and I'm trying as far as possible to keep these vlogs of a reasonable length so that it doesn't bore everybody to tears. Some of the feedback that I got yesterday from one person was the question about, can you let us know how you got to where you got to? And some of you that know me, this might be repetitive, but there might be some of you that know me that don't 100% know my story. So I'm going to spend a bit of time just quickly telling you my story. I want to try and keep it interesting, so I'm going to give you some details about how I got to where I am at the moment and the important lessons that I learned along the way. So I'm going to get stuck straight into the fact that I was born into a sort of an upper class family in South Africa. I was born in a place called Durban. I come from an amazingly stable and beautiful family where my parents are still together, married for 42 years. I have a younger brother who is also really happily married, and his marriage is a shining example of what a marriage should be. I've got two amazing nieces from my brother and his wife. And I grew up going to a semi-private high school in South Africa, and shortly after leaving high school, I was faced with the decision about what I needed to do with my life, and I had no clue, no idea what I wanted to do. I had visions of a lot of money because I think that was, I don't know, potentially the world that I came from, and this idea that I needed to make a lot of money, and that was my idea. I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to do that, and after messing around for 1 year, I did a certificate in project management, which my dad spoke me into doing, which to this day, I use that skill on an ongoing basis, and I'm glad I did that. But after that, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I took the decision then to go traveling, and I headed off to America to summer camp, where I was a water ski instructor for 2 consecutive summers in a row. That little stint of travel ended up being 5 years, which included 2 summers in America, and around 3 years of living in London, working as a restaurant manager, and amongst other things, most of the time was as a restaurant manager in the West End of London. There are loads of stories which I'm sure will come up in future discussions about London and some of the stuff I got up to there. But it was a really amazing time. It wasn't career advancing. I was living and partying and working in a restaurant and making money and doing drugs and having lots of sex, and it was a really cool time, but I wasn't really finding my direction of really what I wanted to do with my life. And while I was in the space, it was cool, but I also realized that it wasn't the place that I was going to spend the rest of my life. I always knew that I was going to have to get out of there at some point. So I got out of there with the view of becoming a stockbroker. I came back to South Africa. I studied finance with a view of going into investment banking, and as a function of circumstance, I didn't end up in investment banking or being a stockbroker. And at the time, I was pretty gutted because that was really what I wanted to do. And when it didn't happen, I was pretty upset about it. And I look back now in hindsight, and I'm so glad that my life didn't take that path at that specific time, because it was something that I thought that I wanted, and I realized I was following it for the money and the big paycheck, really. And I realized I would have been desperately unhappy had I taken that particular path. So as a function of that, I got involved in my dad's IT business, and at the same time, I set up an advertising agency with a friend from school. And that became my life for the next 10 years. I worked with my dad in his IT company, which we subsequently sold. And I built my advertising agency, and that grew really, really nicely. And everything was going exactly according to plan in terms of how my life was supposed to look. And along the way, we had a couple of changes in the ownership of the business, and for the last, I would say, 5 years, the business was going really nicely. I had an amazing partner who's a really good friend of mine, and still is. And I would say for the last 3 years of that business, I started to get really bored. I had this sort of dull feeling inside myself about the way that the business was going and how I was just existing. And I had an internal conversation with myself about being grateful and making sure that I didn't, well, the conversation went like this. It would be something along the lines of like, oh, I'm bored of this. What should I do? I need to do something else. And then my conversation would be, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Your business is making money. It's employing people. You've bought a house. You bought a car. You bought all this stuff. And it was just an internal struggle for me. And I didn't necessarily realize that it was a struggle at the time. So as a set of circumstances may have, eventually after, I would say about 3 years, when I look back now, I was unhappy with this idea of how my life looked and how things felt. But I didn't want to get out of the business because I felt I would be letting a lot of people down, and most importantly my partner at the time, Leanne, and I didn't want to let her down. And for a long time that was the reason that I didn't get out of the business, although I knew that I wanted to inside. And finally, when it got too much for me, I one day made the decision, and I sat down with Leanne and I told her that the conversation went something like this: I'm not sure what I'm going to do, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'm tired of doing this in this business and I want to get out of it and do something else. And either you keep it or I keep it, but I can't do it like this anymore. I'm done. And I was expecting like bombshells to go off. And she just looked at me and said something along the lines of, what's taken you so long to come and tell me? And this lesson that I subsequently learned relates a little bit to the vlog that I did on the side of the mountain a couple of days ago. And that's that idea of like, so often we build up things in our own minds and we create problems for ourselves that if we just got them out and spoke to the people that were involved or addressed those problems head on, that we would be able to solve them a lot quicker than sometimes they don't even become problems. And this thing could have been solved probably 2 to 3 years before I eventually brought it up, had I just sat down and spoken to Leanne. But I built it up in my mind to be something that it wasn't really. And Leanne still runs that business. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the next couple of steps in my life after that. But the lesson is, first of all, just that idea of tackling things as they come up and not creating problems for ourselves. And the other is that lesson of hindsight. When I look back on my life and the fact that I didn't end up as a stockbroker, I am really grateful for the gift of hindsight, for the ability to be able to see now that would have been a really terrible path for me to have gone down. And I think it's easy to look back and do that now, and I think it's an important skill to look back and have hindsight and go, okay, I learned the lesson and I see why that didn't happen. The real lesson, and this is probably the more difficult part, is the idea to apply that same mindset to the challenges that you have in your life at the moment. Because whatever you're struggling with at the moment, not getting a job as a stockbroker, your life changing, a specific path, have the foresight and the self-awareness to know that in the future, you can look back on today and be like, oh, I'm so glad that I didn't get my job as a stockbroker or whatever it is. And that's really where the learning is. And then another level on top of that is even the idea of looking forward and almost expecting these things, knowing that tomorrow that there's going to be some shit coming in, down your path, and that whatever happens is always going to work out and be okay. And if you're facing something in your life at the moment, and we all are, we've all got something that's not going exactly according to plan, just trust the process, do what feels right, and know that you're probably going to look back on it in a little while and be like, yes, this is exactly why this particular thing happened. So thanks a lot for joining me. I will probably come online tomorrow because I feel like I've got a whole lot of things to speak about, and this is already close to 9 minutes. If you want to be updated about this vlog and regular content, I'll put a link on this video that you can check out. It's thefreedomfighter.net/vlog. Until next time, take it easy.